Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Dress up, clean up, and introduce our speaker. She's Tammy F. from Prattville, Alabama. I've spoken with Tammy a few times on the phone and was able to spend tonight having dinner with her. I'm anxious to hear her story, so let's please welcome her, okay? Tammy.
I'm Tammy, alcoholic. Nervous, always nervous when I speak. I want to thank the committee for inviting me. The basket that you guys brought today was awesome to the room. I'm just looking forward to this weekend. I hate I missed last night, Mike speaking, because he's really cute. Really hate I missed that. Anyway, I got here really late. I'm from Alabama, and so I drove up yesterday, and unfortunately I had to stop through Vicksburg, which really made a late arrival last night. So anyway, I'm just glad to be here. A few things that I think are really important. First of all, my sobriety date is July the 16th, 1991, and for that I'm very, very grateful. I have a sponsor, and I think that's very important. I have a home group. My home group is the Prattville Downtown Group in Prattville, Alabama. So if you're ever in Prattville, which I don't know why you would be, come see us. We meet every day of the week. And I think that my home group's the best home group in the world. And I've heard if you don't think that, you need to change home groups. So it's very important. I'll tell you, I get very nervous speaking. I was telling Beth, by the way, how many of you know Beth? How many of this is the first time you've seen her in a dress? Let's give her a round of applause, wearing a dress. Woo! I told Beth I'm not wearing a dress tonight because I only have one dress, my AA dress, and I didn't get it to the dry cleaners, so I'm in my suit and Harley boots, so that's going to have to work. But anyway, get so nervous when I'm speaking, and the first time I ever spoke at AA, they took us out of an institution, and I was just a nervous wreck, but I would have done anything to get out of that institution for a minute. So we went, 4 women out of the institution, we went to this AA group in Wetumpka, Alabama. And I got behind the podium, was nervous, shaking, and I put my foot up on the podium, and the whole thing went rolling out in the middle of the floor. And all those old timers were looking at me like, what the hell is she doing to our podium, And that was my first experience. The next time that I spoke, I've been sober over a year, and I spoke at an AA meeting in Selma, Alabama. And I was nervous, went in the bathroom to pray and put my purse on the sink, and the whole sink came off the wall. So I just pushed the sink back up and went and sat down, and a couple seconds later, the door, water was spewing all out of the bathroom, and I was like, Lord, what happened, So, I mean, I really, when I was sober a year probably, and if they even asked me to read at the podium, it would be shaking like this. And this guy in my home group, he said, Tammy, you need to share sometime. I said, I can't, I'm shy. He said, you're not shy. He knew me when I was drinking. He said, there's nothing wrong with you, but you're full of self-centered fear. And won't you try working the steps? And maybe God will remove enough of that, that you can share your experience, strength, and hope. And he was right. I still get nervous, but God's removed enough of that I can share my experience with you. So anyway, I guess I'll get started. I told my sponsor one time, I said, I wish I was a funny speaker. I love funny speakers, don't you? And she said, well, Tammy, your story's pretty sad, so I'm not going to even try to I'm not going to try to tell any jokes because I really will screw them up. But I was born in Montgomery, and this is just kind of how it all started out for me. My mom got pregnant when she was 17, and back in the 60s, that wasn't real cool. My dad rode a Harley. He was a hippie in the 60s. He shot pool for a living. That's what he did, and sold a little drugs on the side. So that's how it all started. So I can tell you, I don't think I was from the Leave It to Beaver family. You know what I mean? That's how it all started. I used to really want to figure out what happened to make me an alcoholic. Did my mama drop me on my head when I was a baby, or what happened? And she probably did. There was an old timer in our group, and he used to say, it really don't matter how the jackass got in the ditch. How you going to get him out? Now, that is what I feel today. I don't know if I was born an alcoholic. Is that pollen killing y'all right now? Oh my goodness. I don't know if I was born an alcoholic, learned to be an alcoholic, I don't know. But like Don said, it really don't matter how you gonna get the jackass out of the ditch. That's what I believe today. When I drink, I don't act right. That's all I need to know. So I had one brother growing up, and I'll tell you this, I always felt different. When I was a kid, I didn't fit in. I always felt a little different. I didn't fit in with the cool kids. I didn't fit in with the jocks. I didn't fit in, at church. I just didn't fit in. I was raised Catholic. Any Catholics? Yeah, it was busy in the Catholic Church. Kneel, sit, stand, and all those rituals I couldn't keep up with. I had one grandmother that was Catholic, one that was Southern Baptist. So a lot of people were shaking their head like, well, yeah. So a lot of confusion over religion. You're going to have to excuse me just a minute. Just did not fit in. And it was like that for me until I was 12 years old. And I took my first drink of alcohol. Now, I don't remember a lot about my childhood, but I remember that first drink. Me and my best friend went and got drunk. I was 12, she was 11. We lived in the projects. By then, my dad was long gone. My mama was doing the best she could to raise me and my brother. And so we snuck out. I lived upstairs and climbed out the window, and we went and got drunk on red malt duck. And that was the wine of choice, I guess, back then. And I can remember that night when I drank those wine coolers and that effect hit me. It was like magic. It was like a magic potion. And for the first time, I fit in. I felt as good as pretty as, would have done anything you wanted to do. Got in trouble the first time I drank, and I got in a lot of trouble after that. They talk about this line you cross into alcoholism. I don't know much about that line, but I'll tell you this. That night, if there's such a line, I think I crossed it. Because from that point on, my whole life started revolving around that next drink. Now I was 12, and of course I couldn't drink every day. But if I wasn't drinking, I was thinking about it, planning it, and couldn't wait till the next time. Got in trouble. My friend, I made it home that night, was in my bed, the room was spinning, but I didn't get busted. My friend, remember, she's 11 years old. She goes home and starts throwing up. And her mother comes in and says, well, have you been eating red candy or what? And she was like, no. And her mother rushed her to the emergency room, thought she was throwing up blood. And the doctor came out laughing and said, this kid's drunk on red wine. Her mother called my mother, and my mother snatched me out of the bed, beat my butt, put me on restriction for 10 years. I don't know what the consequence was, but it really didn't matter what the consequence was, because I had found magic that night. Now I'm going to tell you, from that point, my whole life just started spiraling downhill. I started doing other things, drinking every chance I could, smoking other stuff, doing other stuff. And I'll just say real quickly that drugs are a part of my story. I like to sum up my drug story like this, because I have all the respect for the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, like my Uncle Clarence summed it up. My Uncle Clarence, he was a wino like we view winos. Trench coat, drank his wine out of a paper bag, slept down under the bridge by the river, would come home the first of the month, get his check, we'd rob him. He'd go back under the bridge. Oh, y'all don't know that wino life like that? Well, anyway, I had been out all night one night and came to sick and hungover. And I looked at Clarence and I said, Clarence, give me a drink of that wine. And I took a big old drink of his wine, and it was hot, wild Irish rose. Some of y'all have tried that first thing in the morning. And I spit it out, and I looked at Clarence, and I said, Clarence, you ain't nothing but a wino. And I'll never forget that man looking back at me with disgust, and he said, at least I'm not a Enio. You'll do any damn thing. Now, some of y'all are like, what'd she say? Enio. This is the kind of drunk I was. I would drink Crown Royal or Mad Dog 2020. I'd smoke it, snort it, shoot it. If we were in a bar and you gave me a handful of pills, I would just take them. It could be X-Lax or anything, So Clarence summed up my drug story. I was an Enio, and that's truly what I was. In the 8th grade, I quit school, and about that time, I was about 15, my knight in shining armor came in, and he robbed drugstores for a living. And we just kind of gallivanted around the Southeast, burglarizing, robbing drugstores, and life was great. But the chances are, when you're living like that, you're going to get caught, and we did, in Mississippi. And they sent me back to Alabama. I was a juvenile, and he got sentenced to 40 years at Parchment. And I can remember coming back, and my mom, bless her heart, she would come pick me up at those juvenile detentions, just started going in and out. We'd be driving home, and she'd say, I don't know where I went wrong. And I'd be like, I don't either, but you went wrong somewhere, And the scary thing is that This is a cunning, baffling, and powerful illness we have. And I had no more idea. When I took a drink, I had no idea what would happen. You know, the big book says when we put any alcohol in our system, something happens. And I'm like, you damn right, something happens. And it is never good. So anyway, come back, and I'll tell you, I was 17, daily drinker. And every day when these baby blues open, it was who am I going to con, rob, cheat, manipulate, whatever I had to do to get that next drink. And a lot of that stuff I'm not proud of. But whatever it took to get that next drink. You know, I love to listen to speakers, and one of my favorites was Wino Joe. And he talked about every morning when he woke up and threw his arm off the bed, if it was carpet, it was going to be a good day. And if it was concrete, it was going to be a bad day. And, you know, that's what my life had come to at 17. So anyway, doing whatever it took to get a drink, the next drink. And by the time I was 18, I was in the court in front of a judge with felonies. And, you know, and I can remember standing in front of that judge and him sentencing me to 10 years. And he suspended it. And he gave me 5 years probation. And he was saying some things to me that were kind of beyond my comprehension, like get a job, you know, or go to school or do something. But, you know, I left that courtroom that day with 5 years probation, and I needed a drink after all that, wouldn't you? And I don't know about you, but I didn't do probation well drinking. Never reported to the probation office. But during this time, this keen alcoholic mind started trying to figure out what the problem was. And I did. Montgomery, Alabama is my problem. There's more police there than people. And so, and they're always picking on me. So what I'm going to do is move to Texas. And I had this beautiful vision. Me in Texas, a cowboy, a ranch, good whiskey. Oh, it was a beautiful vision. So I hitchhiked to Texas on the run, which would be your first clue. It wasn't going to be that great. And got to Dallas and took a drink and was just like a Tasmanian devil. You know, when I got to AA, you guys said, anywhere you go, there you are. And I just think, what in the hell does that mean, you know? But today I know what that means. Went to Dallas, took a drink, there I was. You know, I was working down on Harry Hines Boulevard in Dallas, and if you ever been to Dallas, you know what I was doing there. But you had to do whatever it took to get that next drink, you know? So I stayed on the run for a couple years, and if you've ever been on the run, you get really tired. And after a couple years, I did what any good alcoholic would do. I called Mommy and wanted to come back to Alabama, and I did. And I had to go and face those charges. And I went in front of that judge, and he sentenced me to that 10 years he had suspended. And I can remember, you know, in that county jail, I was scared. I mean, I'm fixing to go do 10 years in a penitentiary, and all I've ever seen is movies about prison. And I'm going to get to Tutwiler Prison, and they're going to slap me down and take all my stuff. I mean, all my stuff. Y'all seen the movies, right? Oh, okay. And I was scared, I'm going to tell you. And I laid in that county jail, and I said that jailhouse prayer that we could probably all just say together. God, if you'll get me out of this one, I swear I'll never drink again. And you know, the doors didn't bang open. And I thought, see, if there is a God, I've been dealt a pretty bad hand. And I just took that hate and anger and just ran with it for the next years and years and years. They took us to Tutwiler Prison, is the only prison in Alabama, women's prison, and I can remember they took us to that back gate, and the big book talks about that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And they took you through that back gate, stripped you down, sprayed you like an animal, sprayed you down like an animal. And for the next 2.5 years, that's how I lived, just like an animal. But here's the baffling part of this illness. After a few days in there, I thought, maybe I can survive this. And then guess what happens? This keen alcoholic mind starts trying to figure out what the problem is. And I did. Drugs are my problem. And when I get out, I am through with drugs. It is drinking only. Y'all had never done that? I know some of you have. It's drinking only. And I had this beautiful vision. When I got out, White House picket fence, drinking every now and then, kids, dogs. It was beautiful, the vision. So I did 2.5 years in that prison. The only thing I can tell you is that they did have AA that came in there. And I hear a lot of people that have been to prison say this, and it's true. I went to those meetings because they had coffee and donuts. And we weren't getting many donuts in the penitentiary. So I go to the meetings, don't remember anything that was said, but I remember that lady that brought that meeting every week. And she wore red lipstick. Her name was Miss Margaret. And she's gone on to the big meeting in the sky now. And she talked kind of like me. Hey, sugar. And she'd kiss you on your cheek and leave all that red lipstick on your cheek, which wasn't good in prison, by the way. You really didn't need lipstick all over your cheeks. And I remember I asked her one day, I said, do they pay you to come up here? And she said, no, honey, I come for free and for fun. Because every one of you ladies are doing my time for me. I should have been here many times. And I never forgot that lady telling me that. You know, she was one of my heroes in this program. Right before she passed, she was really sick, and she went into a nursing home, and she started a meeting in the nursing home. And so the last time I saw her, she wanted me to speak there, and it was a little circle of wheelchairs, and I went and spoke. But she went out loving Alcoholics Anonymous, one of my heroes. So anyway, 2.5 years, I went to a few of those meetings, had this beautiful vision in my head, the drinking only was gonna be great. They let me out, my mom picked me up at the front gate. I stopped at the first Chevron on Highway 231 to get me a 6-pack of beer for the drinking only program, right? Took that first Budweiser, drank it. It was like a Tasmanian devil. Back at Enio, doing it all, drunk, until they locked me up again. When I went back to jail, I think I might have stayed out about a year. And I had all these charges because somewhere in this keen alcoholic mind, I decided that I was a physician. And I was writing prescriptions. And I don't know about Louisiana, but Alabama didn't take too kindly to that. So I had all these new felonies with these prescriptions and went back in front of that judge. And today I know this was God doing for me. But that judge, it may not sound like it to you, but he sentenced me to 10 years, running wild with the 10 years I already had. Now, in Alabama, there's no truth in sentencing. So if the judge is in the bad mood, you might get a life sentence. If he's in a good mood, you might get 2 or 3 years. That's just the way Alabama works. So today I know that 10-year sentence, because I was a habitual offender. So here I go back to Tutwiler Prison. Now I've got 20 years because I've got these 2 10-year sentences running wild. And through the back gate in that same infirmary. And this keen alcoholic mind started trying to figure out what went wrong with the program. Remember the drinking only, white picket fence? It was beautiful. And I figured it out. Hard liquor. I get crazy when I drink hard liquor. When I get out this time, it is beer only, because nobody gets drunk on beer, right? And I'm through with the drugs. I might smoke a little weed, because that's God's herb. Come on. Now, as funny as it sounds standing up here telling you this, here's the baffling part of this illness. Bill talks about the delusion that somehow, someday we'll be able to drink like other people. I lived in that delusion. I believed that with all my heart. And let me tell you, I did 2.5 more years believing that with all my heart. When I get out, it's beer only, and I'm through with it. You could have came up there with your big book and said, but Tammy, blah, 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 blah. It didn't matter. I lived in that delusion. And some of you know what I'm talking about, that it's going to be different this time, and here's how. That's what I lived in. So I did 2.5 years, went to a few of those meetings. They let me out on an early parole. I stopped at the exact same Chevron to get a 6-pack of beer only, right? Drank that Budweiser and was like a Tasmanian devil, just backing up, drunk, until they locked me up again. Now, some of you are sitting there like, I am tired of going to prison. Look, I was tired of going to prison, okay? Luckily, this third time, I didn't get a new felony. I went back on a parole violation. Of course, dirty drug screens, not working, you know, you can just name it all. But anyway, they locked me back up, violated my parole. By this time in Alabama, they had the handy-dandy treatment centers in prison. And I always say when I'm speaking in Alabama, if you don't get it here with all these nice people, Department of Corrections will give you treatment, free treatment, long treatment. And you will finish it if you want to get out of prison. And so I went and saw my classification officer, and you're not going to believe this, but they recommended that I needed to go through treatment. I know it's hard to believe. And I don't know what my excuse was going to be this time. Light beer only. I mean, where else do you go with this? I mean, where else do you go? So I did. I went through this treatment at Julia Tutwiler Prison, and I'll tell you, I'm proud to say I'm a graduate from the Wings treatment program, Julia Tutwiler Prison. A lot of things happened to me while I was in treatment. I had some great counselors. We had AA people that came in every week to the treatment dorm, and there was like 200 women in a dorm, and we were all in treatment, a 6-month-long treatment. And one night my counselor told me, said, I want you to go to the front gate and meet the speaker. It's a young lady. Make her feel comfortable, because sometimes coming in there it could be, you know, kind of scary, and there was no telling what them women might scream at you or whatever. So I went to the front gate, and it was the girl I took my first drink of alcohol with. And I hadn't seen her in like 11 years. And she was standing there smiling, her eyes glistening. She said, I'm in AA. And I thought, there is no way nobody's that happy about being in AA, okay? And so she came in, and she told her story, and I always say her goofy little story, and it makes her mad, but whatever. But anyway, she talked about her dog, Booger, and then she talked about when she got sober, she got a horse. And she had always loved animals, and she got a horse, and she named her horse Sober, because when she rode in the rodeos, she wanted to hear over the intercom, "Here comes Della riding sober." And that is so cute now that I'm in AA, you know, it's just adorable, okay? But that night when she said it in that prison, you could have heard a pin drop. We were like, so, you know. All I was wondering if she'd send me a money order. Let me get your address, you know. But let me tell you about Della. She was willing to come to that prison that night and carry the message to me, because we took our first drink together, and I'm going to tell you, we drank alcoholically as young teenagers. And she was willing to come up there that night, and it was somebody I knew. And it really planted a seed. And I hear so many people say, well, I don't go to the jails or the prisons because I've never been there. They can't relate. Well, I'm glad Della didn't say that, because she had never been to jail and she had never been to prison. But she came up there and carried the message to me. So if you get the opportunity to go behind the walls, go. You never know who you're going to see in there. Y'all know the people we were hanging out with, right? So you never know. Just one more story about, I love the speakers that would sacrifice every week to come up there to that prison. And, you know, I had a bad attitude, and every speaker that came up, I sat in the back row and I'd raise my hand. We'd get to ask them questions, you know, after they'd tell their story. And I'd ask the same question every time. Just what do you do for fun? And them AA folks would start trying to tell me. They'd say, well, we go to meetings. Sometimes we go out for ice cream. And we even go to conferences sometimes. And I'm sitting in that back in that penitentiary thinking, should I just blow my brains out? Or am I ready for the AA party? You know what I mean? And they'd want me to get it so bad. You know, and I'll never forget Hollywood. He's a good friend of mine. He's a biker. And he came up there and he was in his leathers looking like these guys back here. What's up? And he had his leathers on, long hair. My first thought was, there's no way you can ride a Harley and not at least smoke pot. Come on. And I've had a Harley since I've been sober, and you can do that. You really can. But Joe came in, and after he gave his talk, I asked the same question. Just what do you do for fun? And I'll never forget what he said to me. He looked back and he said, I tell you this, honey, I'm having a hell of a lot more fun than you're having sitting in the penitentiary. Now, it is a lesson that I still use today. When you tell newcomers, you're just like wasting your air telling them what we do for fun. You know, I say this. I know it's hard to believe, but one day, going to jail, peeing your pants, losing your children, making your mama cry, one day all that's not going to be fun. I know it's hard to believe, and they're always just looking at you like wet brain, you know, but it's just like you waste your air, you know. Oh, it's fun. Newcomers are fun. So anyway, I finished treatment with honors. You know, I was just like a great treatment inmate. And they let me out. And I had a lot of yeah buts. I'll go to meetings, but I don't think I need one every day. I'll get a sponsor, but she's had to be in prison at least twice. And everything they said, it was yeah, but. Any of y'all know what the yeah buts are? Yeah. So I didn't go to meeting the first day. Then 24 hours, I was drunk. But then 4 or 5 months, I was in my parole officer's office, and guess what? He was fixing to send me back for my 4th trip back to Tutwiler. And I know today this was God doing for me. I told that man, please don't send me back. I know what I need to do. I didn't do it. Just give me a chance. He said, I'll give you 48 hours. And he was the meanest parole officer I'd ever had, wore a hearing aid, turned it up and down and up and down. And he let me walk out of there that day, and I called my counselor, and she got me in a place in Sylacauga, Alabama, called Caradell Lodge. And this is what happened to me as I look back at the chain of events. I went up to this treatment center, and it was a real pretty place, and I was sitting out on in this field at a picnic table, and I just started crying, and I could not stop. And I reached out to this God, and I said, if I've got to go back to Tutwiler, and I've got to keep living like this, then just please help me end it all right now. I know today I was at that place the book talks about, the jumping off place, where I couldn't imagine life without alcohol. I couldn't imagine life with it, and I truly wished for the end. That moment of desperation that all of us, if you've been sober a day or 40-something years, we all had that moment of desperation, and that's where I was that day. It talks about this spiritual experience, and I didn't have a burning bush or a bolt of lightning, but it was like my mind opened up this much. And the next thought was, AA can't be as bad as the way you're living now. That may not sound spiritual to you, but if you had asked me about AA the day before, I would have said, man, I can't live like that. It's just a bunch of old men. They're too old to drink. When I get that old, I'll quit too. And I tell you everything awful about AA, and I had never even been. So was it a spiritual experience for me? Yes, it was. I finished that treatment, and when I got out, I did just what they told me. I made a meeting the first day, and I'll always be so grateful for your unconditional love. Now, we all are sick when we get here, you know, and I was real sick. I mean, I was a legend in my own mind. You know, I was borderline institutionalized. I was socially retarded. I mean, I was a mess. And I remember going to my first home group, and I had the big knife and brogans and dapped around in there. And I'd get mad at them old timers and be like, I'll carve my initials in his bald head. Now think about that at your home group. You know, now I'm so embarrassed, but that's just the way I was. You know, and I love thinking back to those first days in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love watching newcomers come in. Like, they say things like, the first drink gets you drunk. And I said, well, what in the hell was y'all drinking? Moonshine? One drink, really? And today I know what that means. That first drink will get you drunk. I didn't argue well. You know, I'd be at the business meetings, and you know how we love to argue about paper or styrofoam or smoking. Well, when we'd start arguing about that in the business meeting, I'd be wanting to fight, like really, because that's what we did when you got mad and argued. So, you know, my sponsor was always so funny because she would not let me do any service work at the district or area level till I was 5 years sober. She was like, I can see the headlines now. Person stabbed at area assembly over smoking, you know. So, And they would say things like, when you're real sick, when we get the real sick ones come into AA, and you say, just keep coming back. But we say it with a little tone when they're real sick, don't we? And a little shake, just keep coming back. Well, at first I thought they were being nice to me. Then I realized they were being sarcastic. So then I would want to fight them about it. I'd be all up in their face. No, you keep coming back. In AA, I mean, it was insane, But you guys just kept loving me and kept loving me. And, my journey, and just really quickly, my time's limited, but, I always like to think of my journey through the steps. And come on now, the first step. Could we go to prison anymore without a life, without sentence? I mean, I drank every drop and tried to act right. It just took everything that it took. But when I think about step 2 and coming to believe in something other than this, I think about my first sponsor. And she really believed in the home group and service, and I do too. There's like a magic in that. And when I was new, I had a problem a minute, did y'all? And I'd call my sponsor, whatever the problem was that day. And she'd say, okay, meet me at the group. And I'd say, okay, she's gonna loan me the $50 or whatever I needed, And we'd get to the AA group, and she would hand me the Comet and the toilet scrubber. And I would be back there scrubbing those AA toilets thinking, what does this have to do with sobriety? But I wouldn't drink that day. So when I think of step 2, I think about the power of suggestion. Back then, they would pull up at your house, blow the horn, and say, get in the car. And then you're going down the road, and they're like, we're going to a conference. I don't even have any clothes. They didn't care. I mean, that's when I sobered up the way they did it. This sponsor suggested I go to a meeting every day. I did that, whether I thought I needed it or not. She said, pray in the morning, pray at night. I didn't even know if I believed she suggested it. I did it. And I started staying sober. So when I think of step 2, I think of the power of suggestion. Now, I try it with some of the new girls at my group. I'll hand them the toilet scrubber and the Comet. And they'll be like, I don't think so. I just got my nails did. Or whatever. But, I guess I was stupid or willing enough to do it. I don't know. When I think of step 3, my sponsor was a big book thumper. And we did step 3 right out of the book, did the prayer together, holding hands on our knees. And I didn't really feel anything but a little silly doing that with her. It's only in hindsight that I start seeing how God was working in my life when I made that decision. I like to tell this one story about I'd never worked except when I was in prison. I quit school in the 8th grade. I took my GED at the prison. One day I'm watching TV, and this commercial comes on. It says, adults go back to school. And at the bottom it says, financial aid available. Well, I'm an old school con, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go down there and con some of that financial aid money. And I'll pay it back when I get to the 8th and 9th step, So I go down to Troy University. Now remember what I look like. Now I've got on brogans, I got a big switchblade, chains, leather, looking crazy. I go down to the university, and there's tables and people everywhere. I walk up to the first table and say, I want to see about getting some of that financial aid money. She was like, well, take this paper and go to the next table. So they send me around these tables. I'm at the last table, and I said, I want to see about getting some of that financial aid money. And this lady said, well, why don't you sign up for a class and you can get your financial aid money next week. And I said, well, I guess. She said, what about history? I said, well, I guess history will be all right. I don't know. And so I get back to my car and I'm thinking, I'm starting college in the morning. I don't even have a pencil, you know what I mean? But let me tell you about going back to my home group. I walk in and say, guess what, guys? I'm starting college tomorrow. Their faces was like terror and shock and disbelief. But this is what they said. They said, you know what, Tammy? And they were trying not to laugh because it was pretty funny. They said, you can do anything you want to do if you keep your sobriety number one in your life. I am so glad they told me that. You know, my grandmother used to tell me that. She'd say, with God, all things are possible. I couldn't hear her. But when that group of drunks said, Tammy, with God, all things are possible, I heard them and I believed it. So I went to college. I took that history class and made a C. I thought, man, you really think this is possible? 8th grade dropout now. And in '96, I graduated with a bachelor's degree. That's AA. That is AA. And so I always like to think of that when I think of the third step, that God, without my permission, started just kind of molding, you know, my life. That as long as I made that decision, he was paving the way. I really did not go down there to start college, but that's what happened. And so a lot of things happened. The fourth and fifth step, I just want to say this. I put off as long as I could doing that fourth step. Anybody else? Just me. Put it off, put it off. And then I had this big thing like, well, I'm a gangster. I'm going to have to get a priest or something, you know, just so stupid. Put it off, put it off. And then I finally did it, and I did do my fifth step with my sponsor. And let me just say, she started telling me some things, and I was like, you don't need to be telling people that, you know. We clean up well, don't we? I mean, look at Beth, for goodness sakes. So anyway, I did the fifth step, and I always like to share this because it was so crucial in my sobriety. My sponsor told me after the fifth step to do just what the big book says regarding the sixth and seventh step. Get quiet for an hour, review the first 5 proposals, everything that it says. But you know what? I was tired after all that. And I didn't feel like doing all that. So I didn't. I just kept on getting it. Didn't really even look at it. Didn't do anything. And the result is, for me, I did not get better. I wasn't drinking. I was going to a lot of meetings, but I wasn't changing. The result of that was, at a little over a year sober or whatever, I found myself rolling around fighting another AA woman in the AA parking lot. That don't do much for your spiritual image, does it? And she signed a warrant on me, and that don't do much for that 20 years of parole I was doing, you know. My parole officer was like, Tammy, you cannot be fighting in AA meetings like that. You know, and since then, we've made amends. I mean, we don't hang out or anything, but my teachers have always said there's no standing still. And let me just say, I believe them today, because I was this close to drinking. Instead of walking around the meeting, oh, I whooped her or whatever, I felt this big. I used to hear the old timers say a lot, you can sober up a old horse thief, and you got a sober horse thief. And I used to think, what the hell does that mean? Well, today I know what it means. You know, just because I wasn't drinking, I wasn't changing. This close to taking a drink. Grace of God, I got back with my sponsor and went back through those steps and realized there's no standing still. Now, let me tell you, when I went back through them this time, 6 and 7, there's so little in the big book about them. The most powerful steps in my life. Because you can write down what a piece of garbage you are in the 4th step, then tell somebody what a piece of garbage you are. Where's the solution in that? Where's the solution? So in the 6 and 7 steps, where I got to say, okay, God, if you're so powerful, here you go, take it all, the good and the bad, and remove the defects of character from me that stand in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellow man. I wasn't useful. Women were scared of me. I wasn't helping any women. Would you ask a woman that looked like an idiot with a big switchblade to be your sponsor? I doubt it. You know, I wasn't useful. I didn't have a purpose. And so God started chipping away. I can't change myself. If I get angry, that's how I handle it. I had to have God's help. And God started chipping away. You know, my group always teased me that they measured my serenity by my knife size going down. And now I don't even have to carry a knife, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, 6 and 7, to me, they're so powerful because I'm not that person I used to be. And thank God for that, you know. Let me just talk about step 8 and 9 just for a minute, because I don't know about you, but this was my war cry as an alcoholic. I'm only hurting me. Mostly, I just hurt me. Y'all ever say that? I think sometimes I had to kind of believe that to live in my own skin. But through the steps, I had to look at just what it says, that I was a tornado roaring through the lives of the people that cared the most for me, and how I could ever say that I was only hurting me. Because let me tell you about my mama. When I would be in that courtroom, standing in front of that judge with all the hate that was in me, and he would be sentencing me to 10 years in the penitentiary, I could hear my mama crying in that courtroom. I didn't shed a tear, but I'm only hurting me. You know, my mom came to that prison every week and visited me. She would have never been in a place like that. She cried when she came, and she cried when she left. And I never shed a tear, but I'm only hurting me. You know, my grandmother, who God blessed me to be sober 17 years with her, I was her only granddaughter. And I'm going to tell you, she worshiped the ground I walked on. During my alcoholism, I was robbing her house, robbing her. And I knocked the table over, and the Bible fell over, and pieces of paper came out. I started picking them up, and every one of them were prayers for me. Because her preacher said if she put the prayers in the favorite verse, God would hear them. I was robbing her house, but I'm only hurting me. You know, I had to go back through and smash that delusion to walk through these steps. And as a result of working a thorough set of steps, steps 8 and 9, I've had a second chance with my family. You know, my mom, I'll tell you, when I graduated in 96 and I walked across that stage in that stupid cap and gown and all that, I didn't do it for me. I did it for my mom. I can tell you, she was the proudest mom in there, because I was always a good starter, but I was never a good finisher, you know. The only other thing she had ever seen me graduate from was a treatment program in the penitentiary. And that was it. You know, I was waiting any minute that night I was graduating for her to have pom-poms or something. You know, God blessed me to be able to be a good granddaughter. And my grandmother, every Sunday I would go have dinner with her, whether I wanted to or not. That was just part of my amends. I call my mother every day, 50 years old, and call my mother every day. Because you know what? I'm overpaid in this program. Just knowing that tonight, my mom don't have to wait for that phone call. And I know many nights when that phone rang, she would think, this is it. This is it. I'm overpaid. So I call her every day as part of my road of reconstruction, you know. My brother, you know, that had to go through all that with me too. And, you know, we're close today. And since I've been sober, he went back to school and he's an attorney, which that's a resentment really, because I needed him to be an attorney back then. And we have a great relationship. And, you know, my dad, I always leave my dad out, but he moved back to Alabama, and today we have a good relationship. You know, I made those amends, and you guys told me, said, Tammy, make amends to society. And I was like, well, how do you do that? And I got off parole after about 8 years, and you said, apply for a pardon. And so I did. I applied for a pardon in Alabama, then found out I needed one in Georgia too. I took a drink. I got around a lot. So today I have a full pardon in Georgia and Alabama, you know. And that's all because you guys told me to do that. Everything I know about living today, you guys told me. You know, you taught me how to live without taking a drink. So I continue to work the steps, you know, when I think of steps 10 and 11, I think all of us that are alcoholics know that big hole in our soul and in our gut that only alcohol could ease for a minute. You know, today I have a God of my understanding. I used to be like one of these people, show me. You know, what if there's not a God and I'm living this goody-two life? And it was just, you know, all that. But I'll tell you this, if you stay in the middle of AA, you'll see a lot of burning bushes. And let me tell you, I can look around my home group and God showed me the burning bushes. When I see you come in and I stayed sober long enough that I didn't miss it, you know, and I see you come in and get sober and your life changes. So I continue to work on that relationship, and God's awesome. You know, I always had this vision that he was taking names and checking them later and blah, blah, blah. And today I have a loving, caring, forgiving God in my own understanding. You guys gave me that, and I thank you. Just a few minutes on the 12th step, you know, after I was sober, I don't know, a couple years, I was able to take a meeting back into that prison. And I was able to hold my head up and not feel better or less than anybody and go in and tell those women, there's another way. You don't have to live like this anymore. And I'll tell you one of the nicest things ever said about me. I listened to a lot of tapes, and Johnny Harris is one of my heroes. And he talked about when he was in prison, the AA person was so committed, he was going to be there every week no matter what. And one night there was a blizzard, and the roads were closed for miles. And the guard said, Johnny, the AA man's not going to be here tonight. And Johnny said, oh, yes, he's going to be here. And he said a few minutes later, there was like bells, and here came the AA man with a horse and sleigh to bring the AA meeting. And he was that committed. And I used to just get chill bumps when I'd hear about that. One night when I was taking the meeting to Tutwiler, there was a tornado that had hit like 5 miles from the prison. And the guard told the inmate that chaired the meeting, Tammy's not coming. There's a tornado 5 miles from here. And that inmate said, yeah, Tammy will be here. And she believed in my commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous that much. One of the nicest things ever. You know, you guys told me when I got sober, Tammy, why don't you go to work? You know, that's what we do. And when we get sober, I was like, work? What's that got to do with sobriety? So I said, well, I'll show them. Nobody's going to hire me with my record. So I went and put applications in at banks, corporate offices, the state of Alabama revenue, and I'd fill out them applications and it'd say, ever been convicted of a felony? I put, oh yeah, additional pages attached. And I would write every felony I'd ever had. And you're not going to believe this, but the state of Alabama Revenue Department gave me a job. I was so mad. I didn't want to work, you know. So I went to work at Department of Revenue as a data entry person. And it's so funny because in Alabama, at the state offices, the inmates come down and work there. And we ride a blue bus, the women do. So every day when I'd be leaving, and my boss said, you don't need to tell everybody about your past. I know, that's good. So every day I'd walk to the parking lot with these little ladies, and the big blue bus would come around the corner, and all the inmates would be like, hey, Tammy. And they never asked, and I never said anything. But, you know, that was my first job, and because you guys told me to get a job. You know, I wouldn't have known any better. And this year, I've got 20 years with the state of Alabama. That is sobriety right there, buddy. That is AA, A-N-A. I know, I don't know if my family's more proud of me working or really being sober, you know what I mean? But anyway, you know, my grandmother, I always wanted her to understand the spiritual part of this program. And she was a Southern Baptist, and so even though she knew I was sober and doing better, she would always say, well, but you need to join a church. And we could never get past that. And even though I would talk about AA and how this path and blah, 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 but I wanted to tell you that after I was sober, probably 10 or more years, it was more than 10 years, I had to take her for a surgery. And she was getting some cancers cut off her face. And when they put her under the drugs, she started yelling, my granddaughter's in A&A. Loud, real loud. And so one of the nurses said that I sponsored her. She came out and got me. She said, Tammy, I know this has got to be your grandmother. So I went and stood. I stood at the door and was listening to her. And she said, yeah, my granddaughter speaks all over the world for A&A. And then she said, she's a missionary for A&A. I started bawling and crying, and the lady I sponsored was like, good Lord. But you know what? My grandmother put the connection. When she called me that, she knew that I had God in my life. And it was so special to me. You know, she passed away, it's probably been about 4 years now. And it killed me to lose her. It did. Because I have no doubt that that woman prayed me right into Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I don't think that was what she was praying for. I think she was praying me into that Southern Baptist church. But anyway, God knows where we need to be. And I know that she got me here. And, you know, I was able to stay sober through that and be there for my mom. She did tell me this, and I believe it, that when we die and meet our Maker, there's going to be one question that we're asked. And that question is, how well have you served me? And you know what? If we stay in the middle of AA, we're going to be all right with God, because you guys gave me an opportunity to serve, to have a purpose, and to be useful. And if that's the question, I think I'm going to be okay. You know, I've had the opportunity to sponsor women, to carry this message. And, you know, in sponsorship, it seems like I always get the sickest of the sickest. And I was sponsoring this one girl right out of prison, and now they carry, I don't know, guns or, you know, tell them what all they got. But they bust a sag. And so we came out of the meeting one night, and she said, if she looks at me one more time, I'm going to slice her throat. And I was like, oh my God, don't cut her, let's pray. You know what I mean? And I thought, full circle, you know, for the grace of God, there go I. Hey guys, I'm gonna tell you, I love AA. I'm looking forward to this weekend. I always love AA in Louisiana. The Cajuns just love me. I've had the opportunity to speak everywhere, but I've got to ask you, can I get a Roll Tide? No. What? But look, I'm going to close with this. I'm closing with this. One of my teachers, yeah, Roll Tide. I heard somebody say it. Was that you? Oh, okay. One of my teachers used to say this, and it's so special for me. And this prayer is, and I'm closing, I know y'all ready to go. God, I know I'm not what I should be. And God, I know I'm not what I could be. But thank you, God, I'm not what I used to be. Thank y'all for having me. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.